I don't know what time it is. I know it's late. I know the city outside my window has gone quiet in that specific way that only happens after 2 a.m. I know I've been lying here for at least an hour, staring at the ceiling like it owes me something. And I know that I can't stop thinking about her, which is fine. She's my boss. She's brilliant. It makes sense that she takes up space in my head. I spend more waking hours in her orbit than anywhere else. Of course she'd follow me home. That's what I keep telling myself. That's the story I keep rehearsing every time her voice surfaces in my memory. The exact cadence of it, the way it drops half a register when she's about to say something that matters. Maya. The way she says my name like she's thought about it first. I press my hand flat against my sternum, like I'm trying to hold something in place. It's nothing. It's work stress. It's admiration. It's the completely normal feeling of wanting to be seen by someone whose opinion you respect, right? I turn onto my side. The city hums. And then I hear it again. Her voice, replaying in my head without my permission, from this afternoon. Just 4 words. Just a question she asked me in that quiet way of hers, the one that makes every word feel chosen carefully. What do you want, Maya? She wasn't asking about the project. And here's the thing I can't explain, the thing I keep circling back to every time I try to fall asleep. I knew exactly what she meant, and I didn't answer her. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. I should tell you about Pisha before I tell you about everything else, because it's too easy to make someone into a symbol when you talk about them from the other side of something big. Too easy to flatten them into the role they played in your story, instead of letting them be a person. Pisha Holloway is 41 years old. She built the company from a 2-person consultancy operating out of a shared workspace in Brooklyn to a 40-person firm with offices in 3 cities. She drinks her coffee black and always finishes it cold. She owns exactly 1 piece of art, a print she bought from a street market in New Orleans. And it hangs slightly crooked in her office, and she has never fixed it, and I once spent an entire meeting trying to figure out if she knew. She does know. She told me, months later, that she likes it that way. Perfection is boring, she said. Crooked things have a story. I think about that a lot. I joined Holloway & Associates 14 months ago as a senior strategist. I was 33, coming off 2 years at a firm in Chicago where I had been very good at my job and very invisible in my own life. I'd had a long relationship that ended quietly. Not badly, just quietly. The kind of ending where you realize the loudest thing in the apartment was the refrigerator. I moved to New York because I needed the noise. My first meeting with Pisha lasted 45 minutes. I'd prepared extensively. I had a portfolio, talking points, a clear narrative about my experience. I had dressed carefully. I was ready. She looked at my portfolio for about 8 minutes and then set it aside and said, "Tell me something that's not in here." I remember thinking, okay, she's that kind. So I told her about the project I'd walked away from in Chicago, the one where I'd disagreed with the client strategy on ethical grounds and said so clearly and was told to find a way to make it work anyway, and I didn't, and I left. I'd kept that out of my portfolio on purpose. Too complicated. Too hard to explain without sounding difficult. She listened. She didn't fill the silence after I finished. Then she said, "Good. You'll fit here." That was it. I got the offer 2 days later. For the first 6 months, Pisha and I had a working relationship that I would describe as genuinely excellent and completely professional. She was demanding in the way that good leaders are demanding. She expected clarity, preparation, intellectual honesty, and the willingness to say when you didn't know something. In return, she gave real feedback, real autonomy, and the specific satisfaction of being trusted to do your job. I liked her. I respected her enormously. That was all. Then came November. The Morrison account, A restructuring project that had been stalled for weeks, suddenly accelerated on a Friday afternoon. Pisha pulled me into a working session at 4 p.m. with the words, "Clear your weekend. Not a request, not an apology. Just a fact, delivered with the small smile that meant she was going to ask a lot of you, and she knew it, and she thought you could handle it." I cleared my weekend. We worked Saturday and most of Sunday in the conference room on the 14th floor. Just the two of us, takeout containers on the table, the kind of conversation that moves fast and doesn't stop for pleasantries. She thinks in frameworks, long branching structures that she maps out in blue marker on the whiteboard while she talks, connecting pieces before she explains why they connect. I think in narrative, in the story a client is telling themselves, in the gap between that story and what's actually happening. We fit together, in that room, in a way that surprised me. At some point Sunday afternoon, she'd pushed her chair back and looked at the board and said quietly, more to herself than to me, "That's it. That's the whole thing right there." And I looked at what she'd built, and what I'd helped build, and I felt, I don't know. I felt the specific pleasure of something clicking into place. Like two things that were made for each other finding their position. I remember noticing in the cab home that I was smiling. I filed it under good work, under professional satisfaction, under the completely normal feeling of having done something well with someone who is very good at what they do. That's what I told myself. I was so good at telling myself things back then. The next week, she called me into her office for a check-in, and at the end, as I was gathering my notes, she said, "You're different when you're working in real time. There's a version of you in meetings, and a version of you when it's just two people trying to solve something." I like the second one better. I laughed. I said something about how I'd try to bring that into the room more often. She looked at me, just for a second, and then looked back at her papers. I didn't know what to do with that look, so I didn't do anything with it. That was my first mistake. The second was letting it happen again, and again, and again. The thing about falling for someone slowly is that there's no single moment you can point to. You can reconstruct it afterward. You can find the places where it was already happening, already in motion, and you didn't notice because you were too busy insisting that everything was fine. I didn't notice. I was very busy insisting. December was the conference in Boston. Pisha and I presented together, a 40-minute session on adaptive strategy for mid-size organizations in a volatile market. We'd prepared separately and merged our materials the night before in the hotel bar, and I remember thinking that she had the best posture I'd ever seen. Like she takes up exactly the right amount of space. Not more, not less. We presented well. We moved around each other's ideas without stepping on them. Afterward, a woman from another firm came up and said, "You two have worked together for a long time." 14 months, I said. The woman raised her eyebrows like that explained something. Pisha didn't say anything. She just touched the back of my elbow lightly, briefly, to signal that someone else was waiting to speak to her, and moved away. I felt that touch for the rest of the night. I told myself it was the wine. I hadn't had any wine. January was the hiring cycle. Pisha brought me into the process at a deeper level than usual, not just evaluating candidates for my team, but sitting in on senior hires across the firm. Hours of conversations, debriefs, the specific intimacy of assessments. What do you think of her? What did you notice? Do you trust her? I noticed that Pisha asks good questions the way some people breathe, automatically, without seeming to prepare. She listens with her whole body. She doesn't look at her phone. She remembers things, a detail from a conversation 6 weeks ago, a concern you mentioned once in passing, the context of something you said that makes this thing you're saying now make sense. It's unsettling to be remembered like that. Or maybe unsettling isn't the right word. Maybe the word is seen. I started doing this thing. I didn't notice I was doing it for a while, where I tracked where she was in a room, not watching her, just aware of her. The same way you're aware of a window on a cold day, the peripheral sense of something that has its own temperature. And then, one afternoon in February, I was in the open workspace when she walked in from the stairwell, still in her coat, and she was laughing at something on her phone, and the laugh was... I don't know how to explain it. It was different from her professional laugh, lower, unguarded, the laugh of someone who's alone. She looked up and saw me looking. I looked down at my screen immediately. But not before I felt something. Something warm and alarmed and entirely unwelcome in that specific way that things are unwelcome when they're already true. I went home that night, and I called my friend Devin, who lives in Portland, and who I've known since college, and who has the particular gift of being able to hear what you're not saying. I told her about work, about the account, about how the quarter was going. I talked for a long time about nothing, and Devin let me talk and then said, "What are you not telling me?" "Nothing," I said. She let the silence be. "There's someone at work," I said. "But it's not a thing. It's not like that." "Okay," Devin said. "She's my boss. Okay, I like working with her. I like her. It's just admiration." "Okay, Maya," Devin said, in the voice that means, "I hear you, and I am choosing not to argue with you right now, but I will remember this conversation." I hung up and felt better for about a day. And then I went back to work, and Pisha held the elevator door open for me and said, "You look like you slept, in this quiet, almost gentle way." And the elevator closed, and I had to look at my shoes for 3 floors. March. The Morrison account closed. We had a small celebration. The team, a restaurant in the West Village. Real food and actual wine this time. Pisha sat across from me, and at some point the conversation broke into smaller conversations, and the two of us ended up talking about nothing in particular. About the city, about this documentary she'd seen, about whether New York winters were worth the summers. She asked me what I'd done before Chicago. I told her about the job I'd taken straight out of grad school in Atlanta, the one I'd stayed in too long because it was comfortable, and comfortable had started to feel like enough. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "What made you leave?" "I got tired of comfortable," I said. It started feeling like settling. She looked at me in a way I couldn't name. Not sad, not recognizing. Something more particular than that. "Yeah," she said, "just that." The conversation moved on. But I kept that "yeah" for a long time afterward. The way she said it like she knew that feeling from the inside. By April, I had stopped pretending I wasn't paying attention to her. I hadn't admitted anything. I hadn't named anything. But I'd stopped performing the indifference, at least in private. I let myself notice. The way her voice changes when she's excited about something. It gets faster and lower at the same time, which shouldn't be possible but is. The way she chews her pen when she's reading something difficult. The way she says "tell me more" to people who are struggling to articulate something, like she's completely willing to wait, like there's no version of this where patience isn't worth it. I noticed all of it, and I put it in a box, and I labeled the box professional context, and I left it on a very high shelf. And then one Tuesday in April, she stopped by my desk at end of day and said, "Want to grab coffee? There's something I want to think through." And I said yes before I thought about it. And we sat in the coffee shop around the corner for 2 hours, and she talked about the company, about a strategic decision she was weighing. And she wasn't asking me as an employee, she was thinking out loud, including me in the actual texture of her uncertainty. I drove home afterward. I'd taken a cab. And I sat in the dark in my apartment, and I thought, this is not fine. Not in a dramatic way. Just as a fact. Like recognizing that a door has been open for a while, and you've just now noticed the draft. This is not fine. And I didn't do anything with it. Not yet. May arrived the way May does in New York, with that specific light that makes the whole city feel like it's trying again. I had been managing, very carefully, for several weeks. Managing means staying professional, being present in work conversations and not in any other kind. Not looking for her when she wasn't in the room. Not tracking the calendar for moments when we'd be in close proximity. Not replaying conversations. Managing means lying to yourself in a highly organized way. The problem with managing is that it requires constant attention. And there are days when your attention is elsewhere. When you're tired or distracted, or when something small happens that you didn't prepare for. On a Wednesday in the second week of May, I was the last person in the office except for her. I was finishing a deliverable. She had been in her office for hours, and I assumed she'd forgotten I was there. I was getting ready to leave when I heard her voice from the hallway. Not to me. On the phone. She was walking slowly, that pacing she does when she's working something through. I couldn't hear the words, just the voice. And then I heard her laugh. That unguarded one, the same one I'd filed away from February. I sat completely still at my desk for 30 seconds. And I thought, I could leave right now. I could pick up my bag, walk to the elevator, go home, and this will stay exactly where it is. And then she appeared in the doorway of the open workspace and said, "Oh, you're still here?" And something in her face rearranged itself. "Just finishing up," I said. She came in and sat down across from me. Not at her usual spot, but right there, close, like the office was suddenly much smaller than it usually is. She set her phone face down on the table. "Good evening?" she asked. "Productive," I said. "You?" "Long," she said. "Good long." And we just sat there for a minute. In the quiet of the empty office, the city doing its thing outside, and it was the most ordinary moment. It was nothing. It was two colleagues at the end of a workday. I felt everything. "Maya," she said. "Yeah." She looked at me in that careful way she has, where she's clearly considered what she's about to say before she says it. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly." "Okay. How are you doing?" "Actually, not professionally. Just you." I opened my mouth and closed it. And then, "I don't know," I said, which was the most honest thing I'd said in weeks. She nodded slowly, like that answer meant something. "You seem like you're carrying something," she said. "I'm not asking what. I just wanted you to know I see it." I looked down at the table. "Thank you," I said. "Really?" She stood up after a moment. She was about to say goodnight. I could feel it. And then she turned back, just once, in the doorway. "You're very good at being present for other people, Maya. You should try it for yourself sometime." She left. I sat in the empty office for 10 minutes without moving, and then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I got out my notebook, the actual paper one, not my phone, and I wrote down everything I was feeling exactly as I felt it, without managing it. It took 4 pages. When I was done, I looked at what I'd written and I thought, oh no, because it was right there. All of it. In my own handwriting, in the ordered way I write when I'm trying to think clearly, and it was completely, undeniably clear. It wasn't admiration. It had never just been admiration. I drove home, cab again, and I called Devon, and this time I told her the truth. All of it. 4 pages worth. She listened. She didn't say I told you so. She said, "What are you going to do?" "Nothing," I said. "She's my boss. The power dynamic alone, I know, and I don't even know if there's nothing there. She's just, she sees me clearly. That's not the same as Maya." "What? Do you remember what you told me you left Atlanta for?" I was quiet for a moment. I got tired of comfortable. "Yeah," Devon said, and she said it in exactly the same way Pisha had. I hung up and stared at my ceiling. June. Nothing happened in June that I can point to, and that was its own kind of event. Nothing happened because I was working very hard to make sure nothing happened. I was polite, I was professional. I was exactly the employee I was supposed to be. I volunteered for the projects that would keep me moving, keep me busy, keep my head full of things that weren't her. She noticed. Of course she noticed. On the last Thursday of June, she called me into her office for what was supposed to be a project check-in. We went through the checklist in about 12 minutes. Then she set her pen down. "You've been different this month," she said. "Have I?" "Less present. Not in your work. Your work's been excellent. But in the room." I looked at her window, at the crooked print. "I've had a lot on my mind," I said. "True. Anything I can help with?" "No," I said. "Also true." She picked her pen back up. She was going to let it go. I could feel the conversation shifting toward the door. And then she said, quietly, almost carefully, "What do you want, Maya?" The room stopped. Not from the project, not from the account. Just out of nowhere. Just that question, sitting in the air between us. I looked at her. She was looking at me. Neither of us pretended she was talking about the project. I said, "I don't know." And I picked up my notes and I walked out. I sat in the bathroom for 5 minutes with cold water running over my wrists, which is what I do when I need to think and my body isn't cooperating. She asked me what I wanted. She looked at me when she asked it. She waited. And I left. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a meeting I barely heard, my mind running and running on those 4 words, on what they meant, on the 15 different ways they could mean something, and the 15 different ways they could mean nothing, and on one specific thing I couldn't resolve, the way she said my name, like she'd been holding it. But before we continue, if you made it this far, it's because you know this feeling. That specific quiet terror of wanting something you've been telling yourself you don't want. Of sitting in a bathroom with cold water on your wrists because your heart made a decision before your head caught up. So go ahead and hit that like button right now. It helps this channel keep bringing stories that feel real, because they are. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe now and turn on the bell. That way, YouTube lets you know whenever a new story drops here. Now, I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had a moment where someone asked you a question and you knew that answering honestly would change everything? What did you do? Tell me. I read every single comment. And tell me what city you're watching from. I'll leave you a heart. Now, back to the story. July. I asked for a week of remote work. I said I had some deep focus projects better handled without the office environment. This was technically true. It was also the most elaborate avoidance strategy I'd deployed in my adult life. I worked from my apartment, from a coffee shop in my neighborhood, from Devon's couch when she came to visit for a long weekend. I stayed very busy. I delivered excellent work. I sent emails at appropriate hours. Pisha responded to every email professionally and precisely and offered nothing personal. I told myself this meant what I needed it to mean. Devon sat across from me on Sunday evening before she flew back and said, "You know you can't keep doing this." "I'm not doing anything. Maya, you moved to New York because you were tired of comfortable. This is different." "How?" I didn't answer. "You're not afraid of her," Devon said. "You're afraid of yourself, of what it would mean, about what you want, about all the ways wanting it complicates things. It's more complicated than you're making it sound." "I know it is." She was quiet. "But I've watched you not live your life before, and I love you too much to watch you do it again." I came back to the office the following Monday. Pisha was in a client call when I arrived. I sat up at my desk, and I did my work, and at 11:30, she came into the workspace and said, "Good morning," in that level, careful tone she'd been using since our office conversation. "Good morning," I said. We both looked at our screens. This was what I had to look forward to. Manage distance. careful professionalism. The slow erosion of something I hadn't even named out loud yet, worn down by all the words neither of us was saying. I thought about Atlanta, about comfortable, about the refrigerator that was the loudest thing. I thought about the 4 pages in my notebook. At 2:15, she had a break between meetings, and she went to the kitchen and I followed her. I didn't plan to follow her. My body decided before I did. She was pouring coffee that was definitely cold, and she looked up when I came in, and something shifted in her expression. Alert, like she recognized that this was different from the last 3 weeks. I closed the kitchen door behind me. "I owe you an answer," I said. She set down the mug. She didn't ask what answer. She already knew. "I want things to be complicated," I said. "That's my answer. When you asked me what I wanted, the honest answer is that I want the complicated version. I want the one where I can't just file things away and stay professional. I want the thing that makes me lose my composure in a bathroom because I don't know what to do with it." I stopped. I was talking too fast. I made myself slow down. I want that because the only time I've ever felt that way it's been with you, and I've been pretending for months that wasn't true, and I'm tired of pretending. The kitchen was very quiet. Pisha looked at me for a long moment. She wasn't shocked. That was the first thing I noticed. She wasn't performing surprise. She was thinking, absorbing, the way she does in meetings when someone has said something true that requires a real response rather than a fast one. "You know this is complicated," she said, "structurally." "I know. I'm your direct supervisor." "I know. And I want to be very clear about something." She looked at me directly. "I've been aware of this, of whatever this is, for longer than I should have been without saying something. And I didn't say anything because I couldn't tell what was mine and what was projection, and because I was not going to be someone who uses a position like mine to make something happen that might not have otherwise. My heart was doing something very unreasonable. "That's why you asked me what I wanted," I said. "Yes. You were waiting." She was quiet for a moment. "I was trying to give you room to know for yourself," she said, "without any wait from me." I exhaled, long and slow. "Okay," I said. "I know. For myself." She picked up her coffee mug. And then she said, very quietly, with that quality she has when she's said the thing that matters, "So do I. There are things you don't expect when you finally stop pretending. You don't expect the relief to feel physical, like something that was clenched has let go, like your body was holding a shape for so long it forgot there were other shapes possible." I went home that evening and I called Devin. She answered on the second ring and I said, "I told her." She didn't say a word. I heard her exhale. "And?" "She knew," I said. "She's been waiting for me to know it for myself." Devin made a sound I can only describe as quiet triumph. "What happens next?" she asked. "I don't know exactly, and I meant it. But we're going to figure it out, the right way, properly." The right way took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of conversations, real ones, not the managed kind, about what it would mean, about the structure of the company, about the discomfort of not wanting our professional lives to become unrecognizable, about what needed to be said to the right people and when. I won't make it sound simple. It wasn't simple. 2 of our colleagues were confused. One was supportive immediately. Another went quiet in a way that required a separate conversation. Pisha spoke to her own board. I spoke to HR, which was genuinely one of the most uncomfortable conversations I've ever had. Not because anyone was unkind, but because there's a particular vulnerability in formalizing something that was, until recently, just yours. There was a week in the middle where I wasn't sure how it would land, where I questioned the whole thing, where I came home and sat with the notebook again and read back through those 4 pages and thought, was this worth it? Did I blow up something that was working for something that might not? I called Pisha. She answered immediately, which she always does. I'm second-guessing myself, I said. I need someone to just tell me, is this real? Because I'm in my head, and it feels real, but I'm in my head. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I drove home the night you told me, she said, and I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes. Not because I was upset, because I needed to sit with the fact that something I'd been trying not to want had just happened. And that's not a word I use lightly. I stopped second-guessing. The structural piece resolved the way those things resolve when the people involved are honest and take it seriously, methodically, imperfectly, with some discomfort, and a good amount of care. I moved to a different team lead, a lateral shift that made professional sense independent of everything else. We were transparent about what was happening with the people who needed to know. Not everyone was enthusiastic. Some people were complicated about it, and I learned to let people's complications belong to them. The woman who'd gone quiet at first eventually came to me directly, a conversation over lunch that was awkward and honest, and ended with her saying, I'm still getting there, but I see that you're both taking it seriously. That felt like enough. The night we stopped being careful about it, really stopped, let it be what it was without qualifier, was not dramatic. We were at her apartment. We'd been talking for hours. The city outside was doing what the city does, and at some point the conversation ran out, and she looked at me with that specific directness she has, the one that makes you feel like she's already considered every version of the moment and chosen this one. You don't have to keep explaining yourself to me, she said. I see you already. I've heard a lot of words in my life that I needed. That was the one I hadn't known I was waiting for. I lost some things in the months that followed. A certain comfortable invisibility. The ability to move through my professional world without being perceived in this particular way. The simplicity of having a working life where the most loaded thing was a project deadline. Some relationships that were easier before and have required more tending since. I don't regret it. Not because everything was easy. Not because every person who mattered stayed where I wanted them. Not because the path was clean or certain or smooth. I don't regret it because of what I got. Not her. Yes, her. Obviously, her specifically. But more than that. I got the version of myself who stopped managing and started living. I got the woman who stopped filing her own feelings under professional context and started trusting them. I got to stop being comfortable in the way that comfortable is just another word for numb. Pisha asked me once, months later, what made me finally walk into that kitchen. I thought about Devon, about Atlanta, about the refrigerator. I got tired of comfortable, I said. She looked at me with that look. Yeah, she said. Me too. I finally had what I'd spent months trying not to want. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't without cost. But I was whole. For the first time in longer than I could name. Completely, undeniably myself. And sometimes the most courageous thing isn't a grand gesture. It's walking into a kitchen and telling the truth. If this story reached something in you, type courage in the comments. That's how I know you made it to the end with me. And if you want to keep going, if you want more stories about the moments that change everything, click the video appearing on your screen right now. A big hug, and until the next story. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description.